Now, I've been absolutely terrified to do this job on my own, but the more I've left it, the more I've been needing to get it done. And I'm not scared. So this is my E30, which I bought as a rolling shell, and we ended up sticking a V8 in there, and we built it pretty much from scratch ourselves. Now, I can't believe the car is actually still working without any issues. It's really not broken down at all after about 10 or 12 drift days. But there's a big issue with the car, and I've been putting it off for absolutely months. Now, please ignore the state of the rear wheels. These are just ones that I chucked on for the end of a drift day. Now, considering how skinny these wheels are, you can't really see the problem. But the rear end has a ton of negative camber. I'm on about sitting, it's on about -3 degrees. Now, camber plays a very important role for very different situations. Now, mainly a lot of cars run a lot of negative camber on the front. You'll actually see this in a lot of Formula 1 cars as well. Now, drift cars run a lot of camber at the front, and that's because when you're turning on angle, the wheel will actually over-rotate. So if you have 0 camber on the front, when you're turning in corners, you're only going to be using around half of the tyre. So that's why a lot of cars, including Formula 1 cars, run negative camber on the front, because when they're turning, that's when they'll utilise most of the tyre. Now, different cars run different situations for negative camber and positive camber on the back, but mainly, especially in a drift car like this, you want the most amount of tyre touching the surface at the time. Now, if you see this is actually running a lot of negative camber, meaning 2 things. 1, I'm not getting as much grip as I can get, and 2, I'm just running through tyres as I'm only using half of the tyre. Now, to show you exactly what's happening, these are 2 old tyres which I've just took from a drift day, and I've just took off the wheels. As you can see, I've absolutely killed the inside edge, and the outside edge is barely even touching. Same again for this tyre, no wear on the outside, a ton of wear on the inside. Now, that's making me slow, and it's also affecting my bank account because I have to go through almost twice as much of the tyre. Now, if you do remember when I was building this car, we actually got some adjusters welded onto the subframe so we could adjust camber and toe. Because from standard, these cars don't come with any rear suspension alignment, which is a nightmare. But for some reason, I either don't have enough camber or something's going on, and I still don't have enough adjustment in those adjusters. So we need to do something pretty drastic, and I'm terrified to do it. Now, there is a company up north based in Sheffield, and what they do is they go and they cut the arms and they weld them back together. Now, I spoke to that company, and I initially was going to take it to them, but I've been trying back and forth, trying to find a time which is free for me and free for him, and it's just not happening, and this is never going to get done. So, we've got a grinder, we've got a welder, we have some sole, so let's try and give this a go ourselves. So I don't really know what the hell I'm doing, but I can kind of understand the procedure of how it's done. I've spoke to a couple friends, and we kind of have the idea of how we can actually get this done. So the first part we're going to have to do pretty much by eye. So when the car's lifted, we're at 0 camber, and when the car's sat on the floor, we're at like -3. So what we want to be doing is we want to be cutting the arm and bringing it in, so when it's drooped like this, it's going to be quite a lot of positive camber. So then when it squats, it's going to come down to 0. That is the idea. Now, we don't have to be perfect, because as again, we do have the adjusters on the subframe, so as long as we can just get it into a point which is workable with the adjusters, that'll be fine, because we can dial it in with the adjusters. But what we do need to do is we need to get it in a window which the adjusters actually work on a range of what we need. But first things first, let's remove the wheel so we can get a better view of what we need to be doing. So right now, as you can see on this arm, this is the hub, and it's welded onto the arm there. Now, right now, the hub is just at this angle. And we need the hub to be at this angle. So realistically, right, if we cut along this weld, maybe 3/4 of the way up, half the way up, we cut along this weld and we open up a small gap at the bottom of the arm, we can pull the wheel in, close that gap, and weld it back together. So instead of the hub being like this, it's going to be like this. Now, that is in theory what we're going to be doing. Now, we have got some strength on this arm, and like this here, so this is going to stop it being pulled in. So we're probably going to have to cut this off here as well, just so we've got a little bit more movement in the arm. Now, how we're gonna actually pull the arm in is, well, we're gonna have to just sort that out when we're doing it, because either the weight of the arm is just gonna close it itself, or we talked about using some ratchet straps and ratchet strapping the arm in, or my favorite idea is that we weld 2 nuts onto each side and we put a bolt through and we can kind of wind the arm in and out like that. So long story short, this video is literally me just giving it a go. I have no idea what I'm doing. But what's the worst that could happen? We have to buy a new set of arms. The one thing I don't want is to trailer the car all the way up to Sheffield and just get there and go, I could have done that at home. Do you know what I mean? So let's just give it a go, because we're not about paying people to do things on this channel. Let's fucking give it a go. Okay, so you can actually see this is where the hub is welded onto the arm as standard here. Now, initially I thought, do we want to cut along this line because that's where it's mounted? But then the line is definitely not perpendicular to the car. This is the biggest issue. Where do we cut? Do we want to cut perpendicular to the wheel, going straight to the car, or do we want to cut along the line it's been originally welded on? The only problem is that if you can see, this line is definitely not straight with the car. So my problem is, my worry is that if I cut there and I bring it in, it's going to massively tow the wheel out. Instead of bringing the wheel in like this, it's going to bring it in like this. It's going to massively tow the wheel out. But if you think about it, the wheel sits straight now, and that's where it's been welded in that position. So I did message one other guy last night, and luckily replied this morning. He's called Matt Walker. He's dealt with E30s, he's a high-level drifter, and he said he cuts along this line of the weld. Now the other problem is, how far do we have to cut? So if we cut just down here, it's not going to be enough to pull in. I think we're going to go halfway and see if we can get it moving. Now I am scared to do this, and especially because I've only got one grinder and it's only a 4.5 inch disc. But nothing gets done by being scared, so still gonna send it. Right, so I've opened up quite a hefty gap here, up to halfway. Quite a hefty gap, to be honest, especially at the bottom there like that. I went a little bit off on the other side, but it's fine. I can, because it's not straight. So if you cut straight with the grinder, it doesn't go straight. So as you can see, I've started on this side a bit further over, so I've put a little bit of a gap there in the arm. But it doesn't matter, the gap is quite hefty all the way around. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clean this bit up, put a nut here, put a nut here. And I'm going to thread a bolt through and see if that's enough to close up that bottom. I haven't cut this up yet, and I might potentially have to cut this one off the top as well, just to get it to slide. But I think I'm definitely going to have to cut that one off. But I'm just going to see if I can just get it moving a little bit, to see if that's strong enough. So I might have to cut. There's some oil that's coming out for the middle of the arm as well, which I don't know what it is. You can see it on the floor here. No idea what it is. I was like, have I cut through like a bush or something? But I'm not quite sure. I think it's just some kind of like anti-rusting on the inside of the arm, maybe. I'm not quite sure, but I've got a decent gap there. So I'm just going to see if I can close that gap up. So let's put a nut here, and we'll see if we can thread a bolt through. Just to see if this will work. Got a bolt here. We've got a nut, so we're going to weld that nut on, let's just say there. Then we've got a bigger nut, so that this will go through and act as like a, you know, it'll pull it against it. And then we'll put that there like that. And hopefully, once we thread this bolt, we might see the arm coming together. Right, so I've took a little bit of time off to see what I can do. And I've had to take the cut really all the way up here. And when I'm pulling it in, it is actually pulling it in. We have actually got a bit of positive camber, but I don't think it's enough. I think we need to go even more. This would have just been a lot easier with like a massive 9-inch disc and just gone straight up. But I'm very limited with the grinder because I can't really get in while the hub's still on. It's not necessarily the disc that's getting in the way, it's the actual hub on the other side. So it is actually working. I am actually removing some of that camber by pulling the arm through with that bolt. The only problem is that I'm not actually getting enough camber adjustment with the cut that I've just done. So I'm actually making the cut even bigger, creating a bigger gap in the arm to pull in. Right, after messing around, I've tightened a bolt and I've come to the back, and it's made me feel good about myself because I think this is going to be perfect. So this is what it was before. You see the wheel is pretty much zero camber there, droop. Now this is this side, and you can see we've got a lot of positive camber.
like a hell of a lot more.
The beauty of using a bolt like this is that we should be able to drop the car and it should be strong enough. I'm not going to fully drop the whole weight, but I'm going to go and just see where it's wanting to sit. I'm not going to drop the full weight of the car on the bolt, but I am just going to go nice and slow, because as you can see, the amount of positive camber we've got over that side now is perfect. So now I'm actually really happy with how this is sitting. I don't know what the camber is, but it doesn't really matter. I know it's a little bit positive, which is fine. I reckon it's maybe around +1 degree, which is perfect because we can bring it back to 0 if we want. So I'm confident that that looks flat, and it's pretty much flat. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna jack the car and we're gonna weld this side back together before actually doing the other. So I want to make sure that I fully know how to do it start to finish before we start doing the other side. Or I almost give up at a couple of points just because I was a bit worried that I had to cut all the way up, and I did have to cut off a lot of the strengthening kit as well, so we're gonna have to weld that back on, which might be a little bit of a pain. But let's get this welded. I'm gonna see how good the weld is. The metal's really thick on the arm, it's like 5mm thick, so we should get a nice big fat strong weld on there. But if I want to go a little bit further, I might just put a strap around, or a plate all the way around the outside, just to strengthen up a little bit more. But let's get it jacked up. It's a pain welding on the floor, but since we're doing lower arm stuff, I didn't think I'd have enough room on the ramp, because it might have got in the way. So let's jack it up and let's do some welding.
Now, to get the best weld possible, we're going to try and get off as much as that paint and underseal as possible. So I've got a stone disc and I'm literally just cleaning up all the area so it's bare metal, so the weld's got something nice to stick to.
Gas.
Now, welding on the floor is an absolute nightmare. You can't be consistent with the angle of your gun. And also what happens is that when you're actually welding underneath and you're pointing up, the pool actually doesn't want to go in. It almost sometimes wants to drop out, which makes it very, very difficult. And in my situation with this welder, is the wire actually kept getting caught, and it was so frustrating, but I took my time and I did the best job I could. Now, we also had to weld the strengthening kit back on, because we've actually got a true coilover, meaning that obviously the spring is now pushing on a different part of the suspension on the back. So we put the strengthening kit on just to really strengthen up that rear arm so we could actually cope with the new spring location. So I had to cut it to get the arm to move, so we're going to weld it back on.
So this is the strengthening which I put back on. So I've welded the strengthener back on, which is there on the front, and then this is the actual hub to the arm. So again, definitely not the prettiest. Down at, well, this is where the nuts were, so I need to clean them off, but that's where the nuts were, that's why it's so thick. But I put a nice thick all the way around. Again, it starts getting messy underneath just because my wire stops feeding out, but it's a lot better at the top. And then the other side, which is the one with the big gaps, I had to fill quite a decent sized gap over here, so I've laid it just in case. I'll put the strengthening back on the top, and I'll come all the way down. Again, starts off decent, and then when you start getting underneath, the wire starts feeding out, but I'm confident that'll be strong. It's nice and thick, so I put the welder up super hot and just laid a ton of weld over around it. So, right, let's do the other side, yay! So this time around, I've made a much neater cut. I kind of just took out a section, so I made a nice slit, and then I took a slit out of the arm, so we made like a nice little V, because the arm is actually thinner than the hub, so you can cut through the arm a lot easier. So I've got a nice kind of V all the way around. Now it goes quite high as well. It's as high as I can go without the grinder hitting the arm or hitting the disc, but I think that's high enough. We've took off the strengthening kit from this side as well, which goes here. The only thing I've not done yet is I've not cut this bit of strengthening kit here. Let's hopefully this side goes a lot smoother than the other, because getting to this point would took us like 15 minutes, where it took us a good couple hours. I didn't know how far I needed to go, but now we know.
Well, that was scary. Grinders are terrifying, mate.
How I've not got, I mean, sorry guys, but sorry for this guy. Just a little scratch. Honestly, that was pretty terrifying. Wrapped up all of my joggers. Wow.
And now we've got the correct size gap on the arm, we can actually do the exact same thing again. We're going to weld 2 nuts onto each side of the arm and the hub and use that to pull them together. Now what I learned from the other side is that the metal kind of manipulates. It doesn't just, you know, squeeze in and then pop back when you release the bolt. It's kind of a slow process of getting it tight and then almost loosening it off and going again.
Okay, with a decent amount of cutting and welding nuts on and stuff, I think pretty much got this side bang on as well. So you can see we've really closed up that gap. For some reason this was a lot harder to pull in, but I've put the wheel on and they're pretty much bang on. Pretty much bang on. Both very similar amounts of positive camber. So I've dropped the car as well, and again they're both pretty much bang on. It's hard to tell by eye. So I've just come in and I've just turned this about 5 more turns, just as tight as I could get it. I don't want to go any more because it is pulling the nuts together. So I worry they might snap and I've got to re-weld everything. But pretty much bang on. So I'm going to fill this side in with weld and I'm going to call it a job done, because there was barely any difference by eye and I managed to get an extra 5 turns on this. So it has pulled it in a bit and we've got a nice gap there to fill in with weld, because this is thick metal. So I'd rather get the weld all the way inside of there instead of just, you know, touching the outside. So if they were touching, I'd just be getting a little bit of weld, whereas now I can fully get the weld all the way in that gap. So it's going to be nice and strong. Now this side was a lot neater, and that helped because obviously I had an easier gap to fill in. I know the other side is not nice and pretty, but it's definitely strong, so I filled in even bigger gaps over that side. So nice and pretty around the side. Again, around the bottom, the welder gets a bit annoyed at the bottom, and then same again round here. Got nice and neat round here as well. So I've just got to do this top bit, which I've already cleaned off, and then I have to put on the this thing back on here as well. So I'm gonna have to put that in there and get that welded up as well. So we're gonna finish these off and then we are done. Yay! You know what? I'm actually really happy with that, because I did say I wanted a little bit of quite aggressive positive camber, because we're on full negative on the adjusters, or full positive, which means we can actually dial it back. So I reckon right now we're about +1 degree, which is absolutely perfect, meaning that we still have chance to lower the car a little bit, because I do want it to run lower. The only reason I lifted it was to kind of get a bit of the camber out. And second of all, we can actually match it to both sides and actually get exactly what we need, because we've gone a little bit overboard and we've got room to pull it back. So the fact that I actually did that, I'm actually so fucking proud of myself, because honestly that was actually quite a difficult job, and cutting arms and welding arms back together and hubs is actually quite scary. Another thing is that when you're actually reducing camber and adding camber, you're actually going to affect the toe massively. And so my worry was that I was going to bring the camber in, but it was going to be like massively towed in. And they actually do look square, so I am glad for Matt for messaging me saying I'd cut along that weld, because I would have cut off that weld and it probably would have brought the camber in or the toe in or out crazy as well. So how it's sitting now is like... Now I was actually going to call it a day here and leave it, because I did actually trust those welds, but just out of curiosity I thought, what would Harry think of my welds? So I showed him a picture and this was his reaction. Say that again?
It's going to crack.
It's gonna... My welds are gonna crack.
Yep.
You seem pretty positive.
Eventually, maybe not straight away, but eventually.
Okay, so Harry's said to plate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said even if you weld it, you would have plated it.
Yeah. I would have done that. Yeah.
And you're just a little bit of a better welder than I am, so... And with the advice of someone who is a lot better at welding than I am, we're going to follow that guy's advice. Now, even Harry said that he would put some plates even if he welded it back together. And I am nowhere near as good as a welder as Harry, so we're going to take his advice. So here, I've got a bunch of plates. I reckon they're about 4mm, 3-4mm, something like that. Probably even thicker than that. They're quite thick. We're going to do this, but first of all, we've got to cut down A, all the underseal that I put on in the paint, and B, also we're going to have to grind the welds down so these actually sit flat across the arm. Now, in the last episode, I actually did underseal and paint all the arms. I truly did believe that they would have been strong enough. So first of all, we're going to get a grinder and we're actually going to take off all of that paint. And the good thing about doing this, it actually gives you a chance to cut it down and actually inspect the weld as well. So
you know, like I've pretty much got it all flat now and there's no holes or anything, which is awesome. So we're gonna get the plates, we're gonna put them up to kind of where they need to be. So I was initially gonna put 3, but the arm actually isn't that big. So I've got 2 here. I'm gonna put 1 there like that. And then literally this other one actually cups around and it's a perfect fit over that side as well. Now it's a little bit too bent over at the minute. It's a little bit too harsh of a bend. So we're gonna flatten it out a little bit. We can just get a hammer and whack it, or I think I'm just gonna put it in the vise and just bend it a little bit straighter. But that is gonna be perfect. We'll do a big fat weld here and a big fat weld on here. And all that's gonna do is it's just gonna secure this weld a little bit more down the middle. So it's just gonna weld these 2 plates, well, the arm and the hub together, just give it a lot more strength. Harry did say, he said, look, it might be all right, but it probably will break. And is it worth having that in the back of your mind? Do you know what I mean? You're not gonna wanna drive as hard. You're gonna be worried about coming off the track and blah, blah, blah. He said, just plate it, it's not gonna take long and it'll be absolutely solid then. So let's flat this plate out a little bit and let's get on. We got something like that, which is bang on. Now it is good to have a little bit of a gap for the weld to sit in, but you don't want a massive one where you're spending half the time just bridging it. So you can actually use a hammer and we can still actually move this metal and just manipulate to the shape of the arm. Now I want this to be super thick and super strong, so I've really cranked the heat up on the welder because I know that that plate is thick and I know that the hub is thick as well. So I'm really getting some nice big hot welds on there, but again, it is a pain welding on the floor. So this is it. Again, some parts are prettier where I've got a nice angle of the gun, but some bits are not as pretty. I couldn't clean up in here as well very well because the paint, so I've actually just tried to blast through it with the weld. But again, it's not the prettiest, but I've made sure I've gone over it more times. So there was a nice bit here, but then I went off, see a few little gaps, so I've just blasted over it again. On the bottom, it's quite difficult. I couldn't really see the gap. And obviously it kept fucking pooling down. So again, it's strong, it's good, it's decent. Let's cover it up with some underseal and let's do the other side. When you're trying to weld upside down as well, the wire doesn't come out, the wire stops coming out, or it gets jammed and then it jumps back out again, and you get little bits of weld which bulk up, and I've literally just put a massive hole in my arm because you get these bits of weld that build up and drop off and then drop straight on your arm. And just trying to weld upside down is horrible. The pool just doesn't want to go in. The pool wants to go. It's an absolute nightmare trying to weld upside down. But I've got this side done. Some parts are prettier than others, but any parts that are not pretty or that have, you know, the wires stopped coming out, I've gone over. So there's bits that are like bulking out and stuff, but I'd rather that than it just, you know, not be strong enough. So I've gone over lots of bits. So I've done as best as I can upside down. It's an absolute nightmare. Anyone who's welded, they'll know what I'm talking about. When you're trying to weld like this, it's just shit, man. Now I learnt my lesson. I've actually put on some much better gloves for doing this side. I really don't like wearing big gloves like this, especially when you're working on the floor and you've not got something in advice, because basically your hands don't work. So as you can see there, I just tacked the sides and actually got a hammer, and I'm just closing the gap with the hammer, just manipulating that metal plate just a little bit so it bends around the actual shape of the arm, and it just creates a smaller gap to weld into then.
And with the final bit undersealed, we are done with this job. It is an absolute pain welding on the floor, and I mean, you know, everyone gets it perfect on a vise. Even I'm actually pretty good on a vise. So getting it done on the floor, I've got literally got a massive burn on my wrist here. I did start welding. I did start using some bigger gloves the second hand, but you can't really hold things then when you got the big gloves on. If you're trying to hold a plate in place, it's a pain. But I've done it. Thank God. I'm going to be much happier going out on track with those plates on there. So I feel like it'll be 10 times stronger. So, I'm going to go and jack the car down, leave this for a bit, and hopefully we're going to be going on a drift day very soon as well, because I'd love to see what it feels like now I've got literally full contact patch of the tyre. So I love you all, and we'll see you in the next one.